It is an ever-evolving landscape, the modern workplace. It has become abundantly clear that successful organisations must go beyond fragmented approaches and embrace a holistic strategy that addresses the four pillars of enterprise alignment, which are people, place, process and tools, as you know. Now, to moderate this session, the Director of Enterprise Markets at Crestron, the one and only Max Davies.
Thank you so much.
Round of applause.
The one and only Mr. Stackpole. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's a lunchtime session, so hopefully people will be taking a well-earned break because it's a bit crazy out there, isn't it? I've got to say it's fantastic to be in this room, though, because last year we felt like we were sort of shouting against everybody as we were doing all of this. I'm going to keep my stuff brief because we have 5 very, very talented and opinionated people on stage who want to talk about this subject. So it's my duty to really lion tame them and sort of keep them all together. So I'll just do a brief round of introductions if I can. So Anthony Jeffcoat, I spent the past 30 years dedicated to leading the Pro AV Solutions team and developing innovative solutions that solve critical challenges for our customers. He's still an engineer at heart, deeply interested in developing emerging talent, underscored by dedication to programs that aim to cultivate the next generation of AV technologies. We have Ashish, that's on the next page, has been in the IT industry for 20 years and worked across India, Singapore, and currently based in Australia. He's previously been the Indian country manager and as well as holding regional and worldwide sales roles across various product lines in the IT industry. And currently he occupies the category director for Poly in the HP business. We also have Jay, and Jay is a distinguished audiovisual engineer with over a decade of combined experience in consulting and integration, specialising in system design and project management. Her career initiated an AV integration company where she contributed to iconic projects like the Sydney Opera House at the Perth Stadium. 2017, Jay made the move into consulting, but she's now the engineering manager at Avarice. We have Jonathan Cuthbertson, who is a seasoned technology leader with over a decade of experience in simplifying complex technology, making it user-friendly, joyful to use, known for driving innovation, maintaining cybersecurity, and delivering cutting-edge solutions. He excels in leading teams to success. And last, but by no means least, Mr. Coman. We have Peter Coman, the award-winning designer whose career spans 35 plus years. That doesn't add up looking at you. Really doesn't.
I'm older than I look.
Wow. And
I started when I was 3.
January 2020, Peter packed 2 bags and his cricket bat and moved to New York. He's now the principal of NV5, one of the largest engineering firms in the US. Since moving to the US, he has worked with Fortune 500 companies to help them reimagine their workplaces by leveraging smart technologies and enhancing workplace activities in the user experience. So welcome these guys to the stage. And it doesn't take a genius to realize that we've got 50 minutes and 5 people to talk. So we're going to ask you guys to keep your answers relatively succinct and on point. What we know today is that people have got varying opinions about what breaking the silos mean. And as my first question, I'd like to go through the panels and really sort of get a feel for their real passions around silo breaking and how, and the elements that they like to discuss in this session today. So AJ, I'll kick off with you if we can.
Thank you. Well, I guess the definition of a silo, so a simple definition, I was thinking about this earlier, is really any people who are disconnected or not aligned to the information they need or they need to provide others to execute and innovate. I think a key piece out of that is the alignment piece, but we can probably touch on that as we go through.
100%. Ashish?
So I guess the panelists will also talk about silos within the AV industry. I think one key reason why I want to talk about this topic was the way HP and Poly look at the larger IT industry. And the reason we acquired Poly was from a customer standpoint, AV is a silo right now compared to the rest of the IT strategy. And that also needs to be brought up together. And that's our outside-in view, that anything that an employee touches in the organization should not be a silo, whether it's a PC, printer, peripherals, or the using industry equipment. Everything needs to come together, work together for the customer.
Excellent. And Jay?
How I see silos is like when there's a disconnect or a separation between groups of people within a workplace, whether it is greatly seen in between different levels of management, from graduate to middle to up, and then feeling like that really big disconnect or this fear of the people higher up than you, or even in the ways of in gender within the industry, feeling like separated from that and trying. That's why I really want to break them.
Fantastic. John?
Yeah, I think my co-panelists have really explained what silos are, and I think we need to be aware, we as an AV industry or as a security industry, we have internal silos within our own industry, but then we need to look wider as well and have a look at the complementary industries and also the different divisions within our clients to understand how do we work more closely with them. So it's really about, as AJ said, getting alignment, but also understanding how we can help each other to be able to produce better quality products and outcomes.
Brilliant.
It's actually quite interesting hearing everyone's different take on silos and what comes to mind. For me, what it is probably larger than what the panelists spoke about. It was more the construction industry in general. So when I think of silos and I hear about silos, I think about the way the whole construction process is currently or how we go to market, how we build buildings, how we do fit outs, all that kind of thing, and how siloed, not just, I understand there's obviously silos within every industry, but in general, the construction industry, there's silos. There's silos with the process, that the way we go to market, the way it's designed, the way it's installed, the way it's programmed, silos everywhere. And I would love to break them down.
So if we take the workplace sort of as the overall sort of banner that we're sort of looking at as this, is that if we look at, say, the provisioning of that workplace, for example, there is a construction element in that, and so let's touch on that. That we won't let it run away, because we know we all talk about the big bad builder for as long as it happens. But just in a nutshell, from a couple of you, how do you feel that we are somewhat hamstrung, but trying to put this more of a positive spin, is that are we seeing improvements in that space? Are people starting to understand how those things start to come together? Are we seeing progress, or are we still where we were 100 or so years ago? Maybe come back down the line. Pete, you start.
Yeah, I haven't worked in Australia for 4 or 5 years now, and I don't know what it's like in Australia, so I'm sure the other panelists are going to, sort of elaborate on that. But in the US, and in particular in New York, it's horrible. Like, from a silo perspective, we've got to put conduits in everywhere. We've got to put back boxes in, and that's by the electrician. And there is all these, it's just, there's no cohesion. It's so, every part of the process is siloed. And then what ends up happening is that you then walk into a room and you got 4 switches on the wall and 3 sensors on the ceiling, and there's all this extra cable. And especially with New York, labor isn't cheap over there. You've also got unions that you're dealing with, and then your cables in conduits. So suddenly, instead of having one sensor that could do all those things, it's 3 sensors, 3 cables, 3 pieces of conduit, blah, 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 and it goes on. So it's a huge problem. So I don't see it getting any better, and I just think that they like it that way in New York or in the US, but hopefully it's better here.
Well, I mean, the role of the AV consultant, which is an interesting segue, is to try to break those silos down and really sort of communicate that and be the. I'm a former consultant. I always felt my role was a translator between the technical aspects and what the client's trying to achieve. Jono, what are the conversations you're having with clients? Do they understand that there are issues around this? Do they?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. And to answer your initial question, are we getting better at it? I think you need to take a look in 2 different aspects. Are we getting better at it on a project basis in the construction period? You've got to look at that. And I think we've made great strides there with creating awareness about what AV is and how it integrates into other disciplines.
Yeah.
However, there's always a constraint in that construction process around timing. And while people think, well, you know what, that's a great idea, we can actually integrate together, but we don't have the time. We don't have the time to validate the integrations or work together to make sure we all have the right components to get it to work. Yeah. So you've got to look at it in the construction process, but then you've got to ask yourself, okay, well, if that's the hand we're dealt with in the construction process, where we've got limited time frames and time pressure to deliver a project because, there's a lease expiry or there's a moving or it's a new building, how do we break the silos before we get to the construction process? How do we do it before there's actually a project and get the people talking together to create a strategy around integration of different components, whether it's real estate, whether it's smart building, whether it's AV, whether it's lighting? How do those decisions get made before to create a strategy? So when you get to the construction project, we're already hitting the ground running. And that's where the work needs to be done.
Do you think, Jay, do you think that message is sort of getting through to clients? I mean, because obviously they're acutely more aware of, human aspects around making sure that the human change journey is attended to and those type of things. We're much better at that, and all those aspects around the workplace. I mean, you've just shifted from consulting into integration, so you've kind of seen both sides of that now.
Yeah.
Is it? Do you reckon clients are a bit more aware now?
I think we kind of shelter the clients from a lot of that kind of issues we're having, but like trying to communicate with them at an early stage, and especially in consulting, on when they have a request that is going to rely on having a lot of different aspects going on, to ensure that we're connected to the right people to have those conversations really early and create a really good relationship with them and a mutual respect for them. So there's not like a them versus us. It's us versus the project. It's a huge thing that happens, especially with architects and with builders and stuff, having these conversations early on so they are aware of the constraints, because it's not just a screen on a wall.
Yeah.
There's so many extra moving parts that need to work to make something good. The amount of times you walk into a room and then there's a pendant light hanging in front of a display and the table's not centered to the room and this display is. Those conversations need to be having early on. And and then when the client comes in and sees those problems, they're like, why didn't you talk to them? And
That's
then,
right.
Yeah.
And do you think that obviously with the, dare we say, the dialing down of the workplace being critical in that work experience that we have for a lot of employees, are organisations really starting to focus on, we're hearing about workplace as a destination and those type of things, and trying to encourage people back to the workplace? Are they trying a little bit harder to get it right?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Just making the workplace fun and not feeling like you're an outsider is such an important thing. And having, and making the work, like, you're so separated when you're working from home or like getting back into the office, is you want to have a really healthy, like, what's the word? The culture, like a social culture, and make people excited to go talk to the people they work with, instead of being like, you do this and you do that, and not having like this big gap between people.
Yes, and just one more question, because you mentioned outside when we were chatting around, being a young female in the industry, working for a large engineering firm and that sort of stuff. I mean, cast your mind back to how you felt then. If a young female is coming into that workplace and trying to understand how this is all being pulled together, do you think that's being done a bit better now?
I think leadership is a lot more aware. I have definitely seen a lot of change since when I first started. When I first joined at 21 in the industry, I was every department was such a little clique that they never talk, like they hardly talk to each other. And there was such like a big hierarchy between me as a junior to the director of the company was a big scary man and you didn't talk to him. Trying to break that down and make sure that people are treating people like people. And as now I'm in a management position now, that's super important to me, because I want to make sure that the people in my team come to me and talk to me in questions, because if they're not asking me questions, I'm not doing my job. Like if they're just struggling, I'm not managing them correctly. So people skills, that's good.
So definitely improving. Ashish, from your perspective as being, I suppose, by your own admissions, relatively new to this strange AV industry, are there parallels with the challenges of implementation of to the challenges to excellence, if we sort of call it that are impacted by those sort of structures and those contractual building elements that you've seen in your career? Do you see those impacting other elements of what HP and Poly are bringing to the workplace as well?
Well, first of all, the PC industry is stranger. Trust me on that. I think not so much from a construction construct, but there are always different industries touching any of our industry, right? So for example, even in the PC industry, there are third-party vendors, software vendors who are way ahead of the curve in designing customer solutions. Like my previous role was in workstations where there's a 6 to 12 month project with the software vendor is designing what kind of equipment the customer is going to use. By the time we get the RFP, it's way too late for us to go back to the customer and explain to them why a certain technology works or doesn't work. So I see those parallels where the silos do exist in each industry. I think from what I'm learning right now is that probably everything downstream in our industry, right from consultants to implementations to vendors like us, it's much easier to break those silos. Upwards towards the construction industry probably is a tougher one because as we were chatting outside, they're not technically part of our industry, right? They're just providing us the wireframe or providing us the skeleton to work upon. So I think that's what I see as a parallel to other industries.
But would you say, I mean, there's a lot of talk these days around the more connected and smart buildings and those type of things. As a large organization that can provide insights and data and those type of things to clients, are they not engaging earlier to talk to you about these sort of elements?
I think from a customer standpoint, it goes down to a bit of a risk on where does the ownership belong when you talk about smart buildings. Does it belong to a construction industry or does it belong to a vendor? Because even though we may provide some of those solutions, they're not going to be complete solutions. There'll always be some smart building solutions from other components, which all of them have to work holistically, right? So I think that's the fundamental risk which customers still don't want to take. And that's why we don't see that shift moving away. Now, where we do see customers reaching out to us is in a lot of post-deployment telemetry. Once the equipment does get deployed, they are using a lot more of the telemetry we have, either PolyLens or the HP equipment, to learn and understand what, I would not say what went wrong, but what could have been done better. And then from the existing infrastructure now they have in place, how can they regularly improve that? I think that's where customers are leaning more towards.
Interesting.
That's quite an interesting point. I want to jump in there because that's one of the techniques I think we need to embrace to be able to forecast and have a better strategy in place when we get to a construction project. So the construction project, yes, we're limited by time, deadlines, constraints, but how do we enable better decision making and better strategy creation to happen for the next project? And designing and implementing with an idea of being open and connected to other services, even if you're not connected on day one of the project being finished, is the first key to that. The second key is, as you rightly point out, you need to have ownership. There needs to be someone in charge of that strategy that's able to collect the data from all the different silos, all the different services, all the different departments, and actually create a holistic strategy so that going into the next project or the next event, you've actually got that strategy in place already.
So just jump in on that. So do we have the technology to break down the silos? Yes. Do we have the intellect, the people to break down the silos? Yes. The reason why isn't it happening? And one of the reasons Ashish touched on it was risk. And a lot of the reasons why we are still in silos is because it's almost a risk mitigation. So we have the technology to integrate all these technologies, but we don't because we kind of don't want someone doesn't want 4 services relying on a single device. Maybe that's doing the air conditioning, the lighting, the security, whatever it may be, because they see it as being risk. They're more risk adverse. So let's put 3 sensors in instead of 1 sensor, right? That doesn't make sense to us and the people in the room, but to the client or to the project manager, it kind of does.
Yeah, well, it ticks that box for them, doesn't it? That's that way.
Also, like, if something goes wrong, there's a very clear person on who's at fault, which is that risk. You're like, oh, it's your fault. And in consulting, where it's like when we write a spec, it's all about like drawing that very hard line between what's our responsibility and what's their responsibility.
I'm going to throw to AJ, I suppose, as the integrator here, because I think it's a critical part of that discussion. I mean, you guys are arguably probably got the longest engagement of the project or client lifecycle, because I mean you're potentially defining requirements early on, but also delivering a service right at the end of the lifecycle, and then circling around if you do your job correctly. But are any of these elements sort of starting to resonate with your clients as to sort of really learning lessons around how they can do it? Because you must talk to clients who go, well, we deliver through a builder, we got 5 different things on the wall. We don't want to do that again. We want to do it differently. Or are they? Is there a louder voice somewhere else?
It depends when we're engaged.
Yeah.
So typically, if it's a tender or a consultancy, generally if it's a tender, we would be engaged at we've got 10 stages to our workflow. If we're starting at the first stage, it's qualify the opportunity, it's discover the customer's needs, it's co-design, and then it's put a proposal together. If it's a tender, then we're being engaged at proposal.
That's right. Yeah,
we're not involved. Yeah, we're not involved with the discovery or the co-design. So from the get-go, if you ask our project managers when they're receiving projects, is it getting any better? No, it's not. They're generally way behind from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And it's an understanding of the project. It's a communication path all the way through to all of the stakeholders. To stay aligned, there's 5 key questions that need to be asked, and that is, what's your understanding of the project? What are your concerns? What do you see your role to be? What tools do you need to be able to perform your role? And are you committed to the project?
Okay.
And that's the 5 sort of questions that we keep putting through our project management team, our PMO team, and just continually ask that and try to set up a line of communication all the way back to the customer so we can get to their vision, their mission, purpose, their values. Because at the end of the day, every project in that overall organisation will have those, but the project will have those as well.
Isn't that the consultant's role?
Well, we'd hope so, but it's all the consultants. We all have responsibility to try to understand that, though.
But then it becomes a timing question as well, Pete. So you mentioned, AJ, doing that, the project will have that, but the organisation will have it as well. When you're in that project stage, there's not the time or the focus to be able to develop the strategy and those ideas. It needs to happen outside of a project, and then it gets fed into a project.
Absolutely. I think this is. I'm just going to just to jump in. I think one of the challenges I see is that obviously everybody is being paid for a role and a defined role, and that I think it's your point there, Jonathan, isn't it? Is that sometimes it's hard to break out of your own scope. Is that still? Do clients understand that by restricting you in that narrow scope, they could be achieving a lot more? Or are you having those conversations with clients?
Well, it's funny. Just before I came up here, I was talking to Jonathan Rutledge from WSP, and he was saying that in some instances, and where they're only engaged up to the design phase, and then it gets handed off to the contractor, and then all hell breaks loose, really, because no one is there to control the design intent. Because let's face it, as consultants, we are there much earlier than the contractor is, right? And so we are having those conversations. We are doing the design, and it's not possible. You cannot document every single conversation that you have and ideas and concepts. You can't. You just can't do it. So that's why it's important to retain the consultant all the way through to ensure that the design intent is maintained all the way through, regardless if people come and go on the project. It's like Jonathan's had the conversation with him on day one, and he makes sure that it is working exactly the way that the client wanted it, when they move in. I just wanted to just make a comment to what you said before, Jay, was you said, look, we have our roles and responsibilities and we document those and so on. What I would say as a consultant is, why aren't we putting our hand up to do more? Why aren't we putting our hand up to being, instead of this master integrator role, what about the master consultant role? Why not create an opportunity for ourselves and being that master consultant? We don't have to know everything about HVAC or anything like that, but we know how to integrate with it. Right? So why aren't we? Yeah. And maybe those opportunities don't exist. I'm just saying that as consultants, we have the opportunity to do more and to take more of the project and more responsibility.
It's about that risk and the jumping into more of the unknown, but I definitely encourage it, and having that, I am on top of a lot of things, but I don't do deep dive like a lot of people on site. And if there's an issue going on, this is my consultant hat, not my integrator hat. But creating that clear line of communication is so important, and ensuring that the relationship between the consultant and the integrator is consistent. And one of the most refreshing things was when I was a consultant is if there was an issue on site, I would get the site lead would call me directly and be like, this is a problem. This is what we propose to change it. What do you think? And I'm like, I trust you. That's great. You send me an email, I'll say yes, and we've already organized it and happened it, and we didn't have to make any issues with the client or with the builder. The builder had full trust in us.
Devil's advocate, isn't the master consultant the project manager's role? So in terms of the entity that sits across all of these and this goes across IT, construction, etc. But is the project manager purely managing the project, or should they be coordinating more of this?
Talking about when I say master consultant, I'm talking about from like an integration perspective, right? From a design perspective.
But if I was a property project management company, I'd be like, well, I'm doing that. I'm bringing it all together for you. You don't need anybody else.
Good luck.
In the context of a project, yes. We've been quite successful in being able to be engaged throughout the construction process, as you say, to be able to bring that vision from the start, understanding the needs assessment, knowing what the client really wants, and being able to deliver that in the construction period. But I don't think we've done a good job of extending beyond that. And this is your point about data analytics. What happens after the project is completed? So who's the owner of the analytics? Does it work well? What improvements do we need to make? As consultants and as an industry altogether, we need to be looking to move past that construction process and into the business as usual component, so that we can actually bring real insights to the organizations.
Yeah. And for me, I always say that the workplace should be like a Tesla. It should get better from the moment you buy it, like a Tesla does with updates and they're getting the feedback, they're getting all this data, and how can we make it better? And there's all these improvements. We don't do that. We rarely do that with a workplace. We all, we design it, we see it through the end. Jeff installs it and programs it, and maybe Jeff hangs around. Anthony hangs around for a bit longer than we do because he has that stickiness where with different agreements. But on a whole, we all tend to walk away from it, and that workplace is stuck in time.
So if this is an opportunity, because this is something where the IT industry have done relatively well about sort of a better ownership and maintenance and management model. We're all talking about as a service and those type of things. And I always sort of think if you can talk about AI and as a service in a presentation, you're doing quite well. But is the as a service in a greater curation model? Because we started hearing about curated buildings where the architects would come back and tweak a few things and do a few more things like that. It's very much a model that's come from IT. Is any of that being sort of considered in, say, HP, for example, about you guys being greater involved throughout the entire process?
Yeah, I think before we understand whether it's getting done or not, we need to understand why this discussion is important. Like, why do we need to break the silos? And what's the outcome that needs to go either to consultants or to vendors? But I think in my view, it's to the customers. Why we're not able to break through, or why the IT industry has broken through, is because the customer felt the need or had a big enough pain to break through that silos, whatever existed in the IT industry, and said, I need right installation, I need telemetry post-installation, and I need a continuous improvement. I think till we get there, and the answer to your question is no. We're not seeing it from an AV industry. We for sure have it a lot more in the IT industry. We're not seeing that change because, and I've been just listening to all the other panelists, I think the pain, the way we are discussing is a lot more on our side. Not so much on the customer side. Probably we are not able to show the customer the value that they will get if this gets resolved for the customer. Right? And that's where I see the challenge on why we're not able to progress.
But I'd contest that point, because if you go and walk into any organization and say, how is your workplace technology? The general answer is not as good as it could be. And unfortunately, that's just the environment that we tend to live in.
I think there is a lot of pain.
But I think workplace is a broader construct than just the role AV industry plays in that.
True,
right?
true. Yes.
I think for us to do that, or for customers to do that, they need to define what does a good workplace mean, or what KPIs they need to have for any installation to be successful or not successful. Are those financial benefits? Say I'm setting this up, I'm going to cut X amount of travel, I'm going to cut X amount of OPEX. Is that it? Or since the people are not coming back to work, I will get 60% employees coming back to work 3 days a week. Is that my KPI? Or I have a pre and post, service for employees, to your point, in how the workplace has become important or better, and what role has the AV industry or the room setup played in that.
Yeah, yeah.
Till we don't define those KPIs, yes, you're always going to get, including our organizations, that yeah, the workplace is good, but it can be better, right?
AJ, you guys may have been close to some of the clients' involvement throughout the life cycle. If we could, actually, and Jay, in your role as well, because you're providing those managed services or those services to clients at the moment. Are you talking to them about that greater engagement, the more data points and those type of things to sort of assist them, when they start to refresh and start to do that?
It depends how we're engaged. Often we're engaged as a design and construct. So we're going from the qualify to the co-design. And co-design is really the key piece there. We're co-designing it with them, and we've got access to all of the stakeholders. And typically there, we will lead with how are you going to run your technology post the deployment. What's success mean for you? What's success mean for your customers?
Yeah, yeah.
What's productivity mean for the business? And at the end of the day, what is the shareholder return?
Yeah, yeah.
So understanding those and being able to have those conversations.
Jay, has there been an emphasis in Integrated Land more towards the post construction and post finalization?
Yeah, like the importance of a service agreement and like to ensure that because we are providing a product and unfortunately it doesn't work all the time. It is what it is. Technology does what it does. But ensuring that we have that ongoing relationship and to ensure the comfort and the confidence in our work to be able to be there for our client and breaking down that okay, we've done it, we've brushed our hands off, that's finished. It's not our problem anymore, it's yours. That's in integration, that's where relationships are created. It's that ongoing support, and that's where more work has come from, is to provide that support, especially with online with all the technology these days that you can monitor things remotely, and being able to look after things remotely has completely changed the way we deal with service issues, and being able to identify issues before the client even does.
Yeah, it really there's two separate workflows. There's a project delivery workflow, and there's a separate managed services workflow. And ideally, that managed services workflow would follow an ITIL methodology. And you should be handing over to whoever's going to be supporting that an entire asset register of all of the equipment, how it operates, as built diagrams, all of that information, so they can support it and manage it and monitor it ongoing.
Yeah.
I don't want to become the moderator, Max, but maybe Jay and Anthony, I'm very curious. Those support and maintenance engagements, is it just about keeping it operational, or is there any kind of insights that the customer is asking you to provide? Like, what's the utilization? How can I be doing things differently?
Yeah, it's from an ITIL model. That's stage number 5, which is continual improvement. So if you're doing that through that process, you'll have a service delivery person who's engaged with the customer, and they'll be monitoring all of the data that we're able to collect and bring that back and having those conversations around continual improvement.
Yeah, and also keeping updated. It really is based on project to project and what the client wants. Sometimes they want to know nothing about it, or they want to see what rooms need to be updated or fixed. But also keeping tabs on the life cycle of the products, when things need to be swapped over, and keeping that that continuous communication with the client. So if we would be we'd contact a client and be just let you know that your warranty of this product is coming to an end. Do you want to extend? Do you want to replace? And that's when continued work happens, but also that that confidence that comes back to us. And that might seem like something a little small thing, but to the client, they remember that, they feel looked after, and that that breaks up between that silo of oh, we're just here for the money, we're just here for the project, we only want to install. It's everything that's included in that.
How are we measuring that? It's sort of the point that we discussed previously, is that that there's a lot of seems to be a lot of sort of dare I say, a happy accident. Some things work, some things don't, and we've sort of learnt on the way. But are there measures in place? If you're talking with you guys at the end, in the consulting side of things, are you putting measures in place early to be able to capture those KPIs, those sort of measurement points? Can we transfer that through the life cycle of the project? I mean, Ashish has already talked about the data points and those sort of elements of that. Could we be doing that better? Is that a way to bring out more of these silo breaking sort of behaviors?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit more client led. I mean, we would love to do more on a project. I mean, but everyone's looking at reducing costs on a project, right? And if that's our fees or on the install or whatever, everyone's trying to reduce costs. I get it. So I think if the client is mature enough or forward thinking enough, and they can actually put processes in place where they do want to measure it, then that's great. But the reason why typically a consultant's not seen past practical completion, because that's all we're getting paid to do. We're not getting paid to do any more than that, right? And we don't sell any product, right? You guys make profit out of selling product and programming. It's our time and knowledge and bits of paper with lines on it. That's all we've got to offer, and there's only 24 hours in a day. So we'd be more than happy to implement something like that if the client is willing to pay for it.
Yeah. But I mean, if you were in a position to be able to implement, say, some kind of success criteria along the project, you can presumably get yourselves involved in that as an ongoing role. Because I mean, I think I've certainly seen a lot more consultants doing that these days, and not walking away at the end of the project. Because I mean, typically the balance of fees was hilarious. You load it all up on briefing and design, and then your construction phase is 3 cents at the end for a single inspection. So are we a little bit more aware as the consulting community around giving more at the end? Is that what you guys are doing, John, as well?
That's definitely something I'd want to be more involved in. And Ashish, you kind of mentioned KPIs, and this goes back to our topic of breaking silos. Right now, those KPIs are also siloed. Having the systems connected and being able to feed to each other and create valuable information isn't a KPI of a real estate professional. It isn't a KPI of the IT professional in that organization. They're not looking at that. Their KPIs are uptime or headcount or utilization. And we're not connecting the dots between, and costs. Yeah, cost is a big one. We're not connecting the dots between those because those heads of department aren't looking at it holistically. They're looking at their particular silo and their KPIs, and that's what they're driven to meet.
Absolutely. Are we seeing examples of where this is being done better, though? More of a, we've seen examples of how it's not been done particularly well, but are there glimmers of hope? Are there examples of how certain things are starting to work better?
Yeah, I think there is. And then we see Australian companies like Place OS, Switch Automation. There's another one that doesn't come to mind, but there are these companies that are making great inroads around the world by bringing all these disparate systems together. Right, and that's the thing. They're whilst they're not breaking all the silos that came before them, they're piecing all those silos together at the very end. They're bringing the disparate systems together and be able to treat it as one piece of data and be able to look at create logic engines and all sorts of things. Do some really, really cool stuff. So that is a lot better. That's improved out of sight. But once again, if the client is willing to pay for it. And we're seeing that. As I said, we've done a couple of projects with Place OS in New York, and it's been great. And the customer loves it. But it costs money, and it comes down if they want to spend that money or not.
Yeah.
So where I see it be effective, and it's an emerging sector, is when you have someone that's in charge of the employee experience. So they're not linked to a particular department. They're not linked to specifically IT, or they're not linked to real estate, but they're really looking at the employee experience. And they can integrate or work with the different department heads to collate their KPIs and understand, how do we actually improve the experience for our people? And that's where we can actually provide a lot of value, because we can improve that experience by not taking over, but providing input into what they want to do holistically. So having someone that's sitting separate to the different silos that can kind of become the champion and be the owner of the vision is where it's being used to great effect.
And I think just the biggest issue is how do you measure that user experience? That's really what it comes down to.
Absolutely. If you guys, I mean, and AJ and Ashish, if you're talking to clients as well, are they bringing those sort of people into those discussions? I mean, traditionally that was the human-centric style side of that business was traditionally obviously managed by HR, but that was really hiring and firing. But now we've got experiential people in that environment. So you start to see them bubble up a little bit more now. Are they around?
Not from the not so much from the. We're not involved in that. We don't sort of get the visibility of that. But if you're looking at from our organisation, there's three things that we typically look at. What's the customer experience? Have we provided them value?
Yeah.
You know, and that is probably an NPS score or something similar to that. Absolutely, the employee experience. You know, has productivity been provided for the customer?
Yep.
Have they got the outcome there?
Okay.
That's a key one. I'd say again, the third one. Has the shareholder got the experience there?
Yeah.
They want it from the investment that the organisation's made.
100%.
Yeah. So from a broader IT perspective, we are definitely seeing a lot more engagement of the EUX teams or the end user experience teams in how every IT equipment or AV equipment enables the work process for the employees. And they're still not there, but they're becoming a much more relevant stakeholder in the discussion and design process, not from a technical standpoint, but how is it going to impact the employee morale, motivation, and so on. So we are seeing a lot more engagement of those teams, a lot more. Even in the IT industry, we're seeing not just the EUX teams, but department heads playing a much bigger role, depending on what kind of product is being installed. Much bigger role than the ITDMs is played by the department heads as well at times.
Excellent. And we've been given the 10 minutes time indication, but we'll throw it out to any questions. Otherwise, these guys, I'm sure, can keep talking until everything else happens. But any questions from the audience at all? We got our man with a roving mic if there are any.
I'll have to nick a mic from someone.
Oh, it's okay.
Pete, can I just... Oh, sorry. Ashish has volunteered. I've got number 3 here, Sylvia.
Hi, probably more an observation than a question, but you're talking a lot about going, how do we extract more money out of the client or make the client clear? Is anyone really looking at how do we show the client that so talking as a client or customer perspective, I'm going to get better value out of doing this better planning or doing the managed services at the end, doing the utilization, all of that?
But yeah, I mean, but once again, that comes back to time. Right. We would.
Therefore, give me half an hour of your time, or an hour, or whatever, for the pitch.
Yeah, I think as a consultant, that comes back to our own experience, and we pass on that knowledge and that experience. You know, we're always learning from every project. We do that. It just comes down to if it's something a little bit more tangible, you know, they're after something in particular out of it. And that's just, you know, we're always up against it with time. That's really what it comes down to. So.
I mean, I would add to that, and I would say we are having those conversations. But, you know, to my point about the employee experience, those types of roles are very rare within an organization. So the people that we have access to be able to speak to, we're telling them about the benefits and the opportunities, but that's not part of their remit. So it's not important to them. And if you were to talk to the different heads of the different silos, it's not important to them either, but it's only important to a holistic view. So within an organization, there needs to be a role for a person to have the remit to make that change and be looking at all of the different departments and across a wider spectrum of input.
I think from an integrator, it depends whether we're able to pitch our value to in that. And often we may be more expensive by providing that value. And I'll just use an example. We have a product that we've developed internally called the Project Status Dashboard, and every project gets stood up with that. But it takes a photo of all the work. It's got a task list for all that. The client has visibility of that. It's got an inspection test plan across every single room. So as the space progresses and the project progresses, you've got clear visibility of all of that and a place to go back to. It also captures all of the asset register and IP addresses and a whole lot more data, as well as putting out automated reporting. So that's been a very valuable piece for us to be able to deliver quality projects on time and provide that transparency to all stakeholders.
Over here, Matt.
Hey everyone,
Who let this guy in? Hey?
you're back from New York, mate. Good discussion going here. Ashish, you said something that I think summarises most of what's been said. If there's no need or pain, it's just not going to happen. So what is a customer need? What is a pain point that you're seeing? Specifically you, but also open to the rest of the panel, of course.
Yeah, I think the way we are seeing at a broader level is post-pandemic, the way we measured employee productivity has changed, but we've still not figured out what's the right or the new definition now. And it's become very complex for organizations to figure out, is hybrid the right model? Is back to office the right model? Because some discussions require being back in office. They can't be done virtually, right? You need brainstorming, you need whiteboarding and all that. And till we identify and give guidance to customers, what does that really mean? In terms of, like AJ said, shareholder value, in terms of employee morale, churn happening in the organizations, or overall productivity going up or down. I think till we are not able to quantify that, it's going to be tricky. Data is useful. At times, you can just show data and say, hey, there's been X amount of rooms usage, 60% people back 3 days a week. Sure, those can be indicators. But the organization, in my view, needs to define one or two metric, what they will measure, either shareholder value or employee productivity or revenue margin, whatever, and assume that the AV setup is just one of the many components that will work, but it's essential for that KPI to be succeeded.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. When I'm investing in companies, I'm not thinking about the AV though. You know, as a shareholder.
Yeah, and that's why I said
It's a
that AV
tough
is
one.
going to be one of the components, and it'll be tough for the organization to measure that if, say, the shareholder value went up, what role did the AV industry play or the ad industry play or the HR played? That's why I said earlier, if you have measures on employee well-being and morale, you can have specific questions around it on tools and processes. You know, equipment at home or equipment in office, right? How comfortable it is for them to join meetings, those kind of stuff. Those can again be leading indicators. But I think it's going to be very tough to pinpoint the success of a particular KPI at an organization level to one industry, any industry.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, are there things that we've got two manufacturers here, HP and Crestron? Are there things you're investing in or you're seeing your peers invest in that seem to be what customers want or are asking for?
Gosh, I'm not here to ask questions. I'm here to answer them.
Too bad.
We're always listening, absolutely. I mean, the advent of the introduction of things like more prevalence on monitoring, desk booking, those type of things are definitely, as a result of what people are talking to us about, what the challenges are they're trying to meet. More simplification, all those less boxes, all those type of things. 100%, we're always listening. Certainly, we've seen more. I can certainly tell you that. Take a product like XI Cloud, for example. We launched that 5 to 6 years ago. It was very much it was a push discussion for us. We had to push that discussion to people. Now it's very much a pull discussion. We are being asked about it because it is a prerequisite that people need to monitor. They need to maintain. They need, it's a lot of organizations say to us, there's no way anything can exist in this environment without it being monitored. So from our perspective, yes, definitely those sort of things are indicators of change. They're not the change. They're the indicators of the change, certainly.
Yeah, and we are doing a lot. In fact, I said at the beginning that one of the reasons why the acquisition of Poly and HP happened is for HP's point of view to have a seamless experience for employees. I'll give probably small technical examples, right? All our PCs moving forward will have Bluetooth Direct. Any Poly headset you have, any equipment connects automatically. It's a very small experience for the customer. or we have Camera Pro, where whether you go to a Teams meeting or a Zoom's meeting or any other meeting, you set up how your camera layout would be, what your background is going to be. You don't have to worry about what Teams is going to be setting up as default or Zoom's going to set it default. From a IT manufacturer point of view, that's how we look at bringing or breaking these silos for an employee experience. If you look at AV industry, of course, we have a different role than the consultants and the integrators here. But yeah, a lot of work is happening. There's a lot more I can't share at this point, but you'll see a lot more in the next couple of years on how definitely PC and the poly part is going to be a lot more tighter from HP.
Awesome. Thank you all. We do have to end it there.
I was going to say there was another question over here. This guy here.
Afraid we're out of time, I'm afraid. The guy over there is going to tell me off if I don't end it here.
Is it a quickie?
Depends on the answer, right?
You guys are quick?
Promise.
You guys are quick?
It's a quick question.
Yeah.
I suppose there's been a lot of discussion around these silos and builders, and as Max knows, I play in that commercial property and architect space and just started a firm to try and solve this problem. But how do we, as an AV industry, educate project management firms, architects, those people that are at those desks with those end clients, advising them on what to do on these silos that we're talking about here?
I don't have the answer. In my opinion, it's the system is broken, the process is broken, right? We play a part. The more we can do, the better it is. I don't know. I don't have an answer. I wish it was different. I wish we could. As I said, we have the technology, we have the knowledge, we have the experience on a whole to be able to break those silos down. But if the process does not change, nothing is going to change. And whoever is getting, and that, the only way I can really see it changing, or one driver of that would be the actual owner. If the owner sees value in it and the client sees value in it and they say, we want to do it differently, then things will be done differently. Until that happens, we're going to continue to have to complain about silos, unfortunately.
I would say the silos are not going to be broken internally. You need someone above each of the silos to be able to break them down and get them to talk to each other. So it's not about communicating to those people. It's about creating the role and the responsibility and the remit of someone that's actually directed to break down the silos.
Quick last word from Jane. I think we're going to wrap up. Yeah.
From a personal thing that people can do is just to come in with a very educated mindset. So from talking to architects and other services is just to tell them, explain why we need things, and explain why that kind of stuff, because that's a big gap. It's always, them versus us. Going just to, instead of being just no, and it has to be this way, or talk in the tech jargon we like to talk in, and which is pretty much another language to them. Just kind of change that mindset and the way you view things.
One more.
At the end of the builder relationship and at the end of the project, have a beer with all the stakeholders and give them feedback. And that's generally a good way to get them, educate and everyone get on the same page of what went wrong here and what can we do better.
That's a good way to end. Thank you all. Of course, the conversations will continue, I'm sure. Thank you so much for my panelists for the engaging conversation. I had no doubt this would be a good one. So thank you all. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Max, as well, for moderating the session.